Hello, my friends. Welcome to this special edition of Poetry Changes Lives. I want to talk about the power poetry has to heal us. And I want to illustrate that by quoting from one or two famous poems. What I'm trying to say is that poetry can change our mood. It can take us on a journey from negative emotions to more positive ones. Quite often, negative emotions like anger, grief, or just sadness and anxiety. And poetry can take us through the words that are used to a place of calm, peace, and acceptance. And I want to demonstrate that with a number of poems because they all do similar things. I'm going to start with Homer. 2,500 years ago at least, he was doing what people are still doing today. That journey of change of mood. Homer's famous epic poem, the Iliad, tells the story of really a very brutal war between the Greeks and the Trojans. It took place in what is now Turkey, and it was basically a trade war. It's a long poem, and it starts describing the rage of Achilles, the great Greek warrior hero. It starts with that terrible Greek word menin, which means uncontrollable rage. The first line of the Iliad is menin aide thea peleiadeo Achilleos, which means sing, O muse, of the terrible rage of Achilles, son of Peleus. And it goes on for a further 15,000 odd lines to describe the consequences of that rage in the form of brutal battles, mutilation, bloodletting, and also passages of great beauty about love between husband and wife, between comrades in arms. It describes passages about the futility of war and interaction between men and gods. But it ends after the climactic man-to-man combat between Achilles, the Greek warrior hero, and Hector, the Trojan hero, where finally Hector is slain and his corpse is dragged around the city of Troy by Achilles, pulling it behind his chariot. And the last lines of the Iliad describe the very sad burial rites that the Trojans perform to bury their dead hero Hector. And the last line of the Iliad runs like this: and thus they buried Hector, tamer of horses. That was the way Hector was known to them. Hector, tamer of horses. Hectoros hippodamios, tamer of horses. A very sad, accepting last line. And that, when you look back, if you were to read the whole Iliad from start to finish, which would probably take you 36 hours at least, you would realize Homer has taken you on a journey from brutal warfare through to sad acceptance of the consequences of war and the effect it has on human beings. And that is the magical power of poetry to take us on that journey as it does so often, if you can go to the 20th century, say, and take a famous poem like World War One poet Wilfred Owen's heart-stopping poem Anthem for Doomed Youth, that begins with that angry, despairing question: what passing bells for those that die like cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. And you can hear the despair in the voice of the speaker, and it takes us through more lines of a similar kind, but eventually it takes us to a place of calm sadness and acceptance. Those unforgettable, to me, last couple of lines, they're flowers, the tenderness of quiet minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Such a sad acceptance of what happens in warfare, the consequences for loved ones. And poetry there has taken us on the similar journey, a change of mood. Shakespeare can do it too. Take his wonderful anthem, from his play Cymbeline. It begins, "Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages." It's talking about the death of a great person, but it takes us that voice of loss and sadness right through to a sort of calm, peaceful acceptance. The final line, "And renowned be thy name." Just a sad acceptance of life and death, that even the greatest, the high achievers, all end in the same way. Another example of that poetic journey can be, take that wonderful Victorian inspirational poem, Invictus, that starts with that voice of struggle and near despair. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. And it takes us through all kinds of struggle, but it ends in a much calmer, more kind of accepting, respectful realization. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And that is how just simple reading of poetry can be so therapeutic. It can take us from a place of strong and very negative emotion into a much more calmer, accepting, peaceful state of mind. And that has to be a form of therapy. I think poetry is wonderful, the way it does that. It does so many other things as well, of course. Entertains, inspires, amuses, all kinds of things. I'll talk about those another time. Thanks for listening today.